Gonzaga has contacted 21-year-old Croatian wing Ivan Bogdanovic. Could he be the final puzzle piece for Mark Few's roster?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances by using Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com, folks, and you'll get 50% off for your first year. Lots to cover today. The NCAA Tournament expansion has been discussed, but it has not been voted on by the committee. We're going to discuss what that means for the future of college basketball. Plus, Summer League getting underway on Thursday in Las Vegas. We're going to break down how and when to watch former Zag players in action and the few players who have already gotten going. All that coming up later in the show. But first, we got a recent report that Gonzaga is still actively pursuing players for the upcoming 25-26 college basketball season. And as they often do, they are looking outside of the United States. Gonzaga has reached out to Croatian wing Ivan Bogdanovic. Bogdanovic is a 6'8" forward who will turn 21 on July 13th. So as many of you are listening to this, he's just a few days away from his 21st birthday. Once again, there we have seen so many international players coming over to the United States this offseason who are 20, 21, 22. In the case of North Carolina's recent addition, Luka Bogovac, and Virginia just added a 22-year-old as well. We're seeing it more and more as there's not really a lot of rules preventing that from happening. I think eventually that will be something that is discussed in some kind of collective bargaining between student athletes and NCAA officials. But for right now, kind of a free-for-all. If you can afford them, if you can bring them over, you're going to be able to do that. Gonzaga already, of course, added a freshman in Mario Saint-Superi, who is 19 years old, so not like way older than your typical freshman, and sort of balanced out by the fact that Gonzaga added a 17-year-old last year in Ismaila Diani. But certainly Bogdanovic would be quite old for a player coming over to college basketball for his first season. Gonzaga very, very much not alone in pursuing Bogdanovic since he has announced his intention to come to the United States and play college basketball. The schools who have contacted him per a recent tweet from Armand Jovic are Louisville, Michigan State, Texas A&M, and Gonzaga. We also have heard that both Kansas and Wisconsin are in the mix as well. So you're talking about some legitimate blue blood programs, some of the best programs in this sport of college basketball going out and looking at this Bogdanovic kid, and for good reason. The 6'8" wing really made a name for himself about a year ago last summer during the FIBA U20 EuroBasket tournament in Romania. He was playing for Croatia, and in that event, he averaged 18 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists across 7 games for Croatia. That included a career-high 29 points in a group stage game against Finland. So when playing against players his age, when playing with players his age for the Croatian team and against players at that same age level, he proved he was one of the best players on the floor. 18 points per game, even in 7 games. Obviously, that sample is very, very small, but you don't put up those kind of numbers unless you are one of the best. And these kind of events where everybody is forced to, especially when you're trying to evaluate European talent. I mean, some guys are competing against 30-year-olds, 32-year-olds, older players. And so evaluating how they would play in college is a little bit more difficult. But when you see them compete against other players their age and they look heads and shoulders above the rest, that usually is a pretty good indication. And that's why oftentimes international recruits tend to really pop onto the radar for college basketball teams when they participate in these U20 or U18 events, because you know the competition level is them competing against players at their own age. Bogdanovic has also played professionally in both Montenegro and Croatia. He played with Studenski Centar last year, a team in the ABA, which is a league that a high-level professional league that was initially made up of Yugoslavia teams. So now it's like Montenegro and Bosnia and a handful of other Eastern European countries. Played 19 games for this team last year, about only 9 minutes per game. Again, he was one of the younger players in the league, averaged about 2.5 points per game. He also spent time with Cedevita Junior, which is a lower-level league in Croatia last year, 9 points, 4 boards. It's actually the same team that Luka Krajinovic played for. So I tried to look on their rosters to see if they overlapped. I think they just missed each other by a year, but put some perspective into where, Gonzaga obviously being able to recruit out in that area, already having a connection, already having worked with that staff to bring Krajinovic over when they did a couple years ago. I watched some film on Bogdanovich to kind of get a sense of what type of player he is. He's 6'8". Some places list him as a forward. I also saw a few videos that literally said 6'8" point guard Ivan Bogdanovic. Could just be them trying to come up with a bit of a flashy headline to garner some extra attention. You never quite know, but he didn't look like a point guard to me, but he definitely looks like a potential stretch 4 type candidate. Gonzaga has certainly put 6'8" players in that stretch 4 role. Corey Kispert, Julian Strother. I think this year part of the plan may be Steele Venters to fill into that role a little bit. And watching the film, you can see what type of role he could fill for Gonzaga pretty easily. He's really good at moving without the basketball. So many of the highlights were him relocating after the guards driving to the basket. He's moving on the wing to get open while his defender's kind of pinching in for help, catches a pass, knocks down a shot from the wing. So he relocates really well, moves well without the basketball, a lot of backdoor cuts to the rim after a player drives, and he gets an open lay in that way. In that way, his game is very similar to Corey Kispert and Steele Venters, who both have been known for their off-ball movement and their ability to cut and get open shots by moving without the basketball. He also loves to get out in transition. Tons of plays where he's flying down the floor, catching passes, going up for dunks. He can finish with both hands. Saw a lot of left-handed and right-handed lay-ins. A lot to like in the profile from the handful of video clips that you can find for him on the internet. It's not like we're watching multiple full games, which I think give you a bit of a better picture of the good and the bad for a player like Bogdanovich. But you can see watching the tape that he looks like a player who would fill that small ball 4 role. And it's pretty clear that that's a role that Gonzaga doesn't really have on the roster. I think Steele Venters is probably the answer there right now, but it's definitely kind of one of the few gap areas on the squad because Gonzaga is going to start Graham Ike and Braden Huff in the front court next year. That is all but solidified. They started the final 3 games last year together, and there's no reason based on the roster construction that those two won't start again this year. But the primary backup is Ismaila Diani, and Ismaila Diani is a 5. He's not a 4. He does not have a jump shot. He is not somebody that you're going to want to play away from the rim. He should be playing with his back to the basket, down on the block, pretty much all of the time. And so I think if Diani's a pure 5, and Braden Huff and Graham Ike are your starters in the front court, when Diani's on the floor, whoever else is with him is going to play the 4. I think both Graham and Braden can play the 4, but you still only have 3 guys rotating between those 2 front court positions. That's 80 total minutes every single game. Braden's never played more than 16 minutes a game. Graham in his Gonzaga career has never played more than 23 minutes per game. Diani played just a handful of minutes per game last year. And part of the reason those guys don't play huge minutes is to keep them fresh, but also because they get in foul trouble. You need more depth there. Again, I think Steele Venters is probably who Gonzaga is envisioning as the backup 4. Somebody who's going to fill like sort of a Ben Gregg role, sort of a Michael Ajayi role, kind of a hybrid. I mean, he's more of a 3-point shooter than both of them, frankly, but he's less of a post player than either of them as well. He's more of a, again, more like Corey Kispert, where he's kind of the 3, but if you play him at the 4, you can get away with it because he's still going to play away from the rim, look to make that entry pass, be able to put the ball on the deck. I don't think Gonzaga is going to have their best rebounding team out there when Steele Venters is playing the 4, but they also are able to do more offensively and space the floor better and potentially give whichever of the centers is on the floor some more room to operate. Having said all of that, Bogdanovich could really fit that role quite nicely. He's a little bit bigger just from looking at his height and weight. He's got some size on him. He could throw that around a little bit. I think if you were to bring him on to campus and he were to show up for this season, the odds of him playing a huge role right away are fairly slim just because he won't have that much time to ramp up and learn the system. I also don't think Gonzaga is going to teach him how to play both the 3 and the 4 in one off season when he's not getting started until at the earliest, a week from now, if he were to commit and come to campus, which there's no indication that's happening that soon for him. So I think if you bring him on campus, you teach him how to play the small ball 4 role, you have him be somebody who can fill in that spot. You now have 12 players competing for 8 to 9 rotation spots. The player who gets bumped in my mind, if Bogdanovich comes to campus, is probably Parker Jefferson. I think at this point, Jefferson would probably redshirt if you were to bring Bogdanovich. And you could, in theory, try to convince Bogdanovich to redshirt himself. But I think if Michigan State and Louisville and Wisconsin and all those other schools are in on him and you're saying, hey, we'd love to have you on campus, but you're going to sit for a year, he's not going to be coming to Gonzaga. So if you really want him, you got to promise him some playing time. That's really the only position that I think it works, unless Gonzaga is starting to get a little worried about Tyon Grant-Foster as he waits for his waiver to be approved. That could be a scenario here that Gonzaga is facing. We don't know anything yet. I've continued to say I believe there's no legitimate reason why the NCAA would deny a waiver for an extra year of eligibility for Tyon Grant-Foster, but the NCAA does not need a valid reason to deny a waiver. They've done it before, and they will probably do it again. So that maybe this is in some ways some insurance at the small forward position if Grant Foster were to not have his waiver approved and we're out of eligibility for college basketball. We'll keep an eye on this. Bogdanovich, very talented player, would be a fun fit in Spokane. Of course, Gonzaga's littered with European talent over their history, so they should be selling the heck out of that on the recruiting trail. I'm sure that they are. Hopefully we'll see Bogdanovich in a Gonzaga uniform before too long. Well, folks, all week long, NCAA officials plan to meet on Thursday to make a final decision. Will they expand the NCAA tournament? Will it go to 72 teams? Will it go to 76 teams? Will it stay at 68 teams? We all plan to have an answer on Thursday. No decision was made. So now what happens? We'll talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, do you ever wish managing your money was just a little easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's kind of like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility of and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a generic budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Personally, I found I really like having everything in one app. I don't want to have to go to multiple different apps or check spreadsheets. If it's in one spot where I can see all of it at once, I'm much more likely to pay attention to it, to use it, to get out of it what I can get out of it. It just makes the day-to-day management so much easier. So take control of your finances, folks, by using Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Well, folks, all week long, we knew the NCAA selection committee was meeting, the NCAA committee, Division I committee, not the selection committee. We knew that the committee was meeting on Thursday to discuss whether they were going to expand the NCAA tournament. We'd heard rumblings that they could look to do expansion as soon as 2026, which would be a radical change coming this upcoming season to college basketball. Great articles from Matt Norlander, great articles from other people in this space talking about, sharing their opinions. It's pretty universally accepted that most people who follow this sport on a regular basis are not in favor of NCAA tournament expansion. That does not mean everybody, but the majority of people are not wanting to see the tournament expand past the 68 teams that are currently in the field. But the general consensus was that when the committee meets, they're at least going to make a decision. We'll know one way or another, which is why it was such a big surprise on Thursday early in the afternoon when the NCAA released a statement indicating they haven't made a decision. And in fact, there's nothing that really came out of this meeting. Here's the official statement from the NCAA. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Quote, the NCAA Division I men's and women's basketball committees met this week. The topic of expanding the field for each championship was discussed at length, but no decision or recommendation was made. The still viable outcomes include the tournaments remaining at 68 teams or expanding the fields to either 72 or 76 teams in advance of the 2026 or 2027 championships. This is exactly what I think of when I think of generic press release type statements from big entities like the NCAA. This is a lot of words. I actually cut some of the words out of this to make it a little less verbose that says literally nothing. We met, we talked about it, we came to no conclusion. We didn't make a decision. We also didn't even make a recommendation. And then they follow it up with their last statement, which says the options include, and then they list every option. They didn't eliminate a single option. If it had said the viable outcomes include 68 or 72, but they had lopped off 76 as an option, at least there would have been some sort of progress having been made. But in this statement, every single option is viable. They could stay at 68. They could expand to 72. They could expand to 76. They could expand to 72 in 2026 or 2027. Same with 76. Every option is still on the table. Now, what I think we can infer from this, and many others have agreed with this kind of inference about this meeting, if there was a lot of momentum amongst the committee members for expansion to happen, it would have happened. They would have gotten it done in this meeting. The fact that it did not happen when everybody expected there would be a decision made makes me feel like there's enough dissenters, or at least enough hesitation among the committee members, that this may not be as inevitable as we think. I have gone on record before, and will go on record again, as saying the odds of the NCAA tournament never expanding from 68 are astronomically low. It will expand. And I believe pretty convincingly that it will expand soon. I am not in favor of that, but I think that is very likely to happen. The people who are pushing for expansion are not the commissioners of the WCC or the Horizon League or the Missouri Valley Conference or the A10. The people pushing for this NCAA tournament to expand are Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, Tony Petit, the commissioner of the Big Ten, Brett Yormark of the Big 12. The power conference commissioners want this thing to expand so they can shuffle more of their mediocre teams into the NCAA tournament. It is very transparent. This is not me making an assumption or a guess. This is very blatantly and transparently what they would like to do. This is why most people are not in favor of it. But the fact that it didn't happen, we know those people are pushing for it. And we know that there is a good contingent of people who really do want this thing to expand. But there's also clearly at least some contingent of people amongst the committee members that do not want this thing to expand. Does that mean that they'll win out and it'll stay at 68 forever? No, probably not. It means that these people will continue to do what they can to convince everybody to eventually see their side of this thing and get this thing up to 72 or 76 teams in the near future. And again, this is not something that's going to be good for the majority of college basketball. It's going to get more mediocre high major programs in the NCAA tournament. Over the past 10 years, 83% of at-large bids have gone to high major programs. Last year, 14 of these 16 teams in the SEC made the NCAA tournament. And yes, the SEC was historically excellent last year. And yes, in the ACC SEC Challenge, the SEC went 14-2 and absolutely obliterated the ACC. Yes, many of those teams probably did deserve a bid into the NCAA tournament over the teams that just missed out, whether it was high major teams that missed out like Indiana or West Virginia, or mid-major teams, even like somebody like a Santa Clara or a San Francisco that missed the tournament. Yes, the SEC teams, most of them were probably better. But here's the deal. There were 6 SEC teams that were a 7 seed or lower, so basically the bubble-ish teams out of the SEC that made the tournament. They went a combined 1-5. Arkansas was the only team that won any games in the NCAA tournament last year that was lower than that seed. Gonzaga beat Georgia. St. Mary's beat Vanderbilt. Those are a couple examples. Mississippi State lost. Texas got a play-in game and got smacked by Xavier. Like, most of those teams didn't do very good when they made the tournament. So I think there is an argument that that was probably too many. But they're pushing for more. They're pushing to get everybody that they can get into this tournament if they can. And the Big Ten and the SEC have continued to push heavily for this. And if it was going to adding 8 teams, which is the maximum they're talking about adding, from 68 to 76, if adding 8 teams would guarantee 5 more mid-majors getting into the tournament, I might change my tune a little bit, even if it guaranteed 3 or 4. But it's not. It's probably going to be 7 more high major teams and then 1 mid-major team. So maybe you get a UC Irvine in, like they should have been last year, Indiana State 2 years ago. Maybe every couple of years this benefits a Santa Clara or a San Francisco. Obviously that conversation changes a bit with the WCC losing Gonzaga, but the point still stands. There are mid-major teams every year that deserve it, and an expansion of the tournament doesn't seem likely to benefit those teams. And if it were, I think we might feel differently. but it's pretty clear that's not what's going to happen. You're going to get more teams that went 6-12 in their conference, which if you think, Andy, don't be ridiculous. There's no way a 6-12 team in conference play would ever make the tournament. Oklahoma did last year. They did last year. This just happened. So it's very much something that's on the table for these teams to continue to get teams that don't even do well at all in their regular season to make the NCAA tournament. Beyond that, this is the last point I'll make. The logistics of expanding the tournament seem very difficult to overcome. And I do think that this, probably more than anything else, is the hurdle that the committee is kind of sitting on right now. Because you have Selection Sunday. They're not changing that. It is a staple of college basketball. It's going to be on Sunday. It's going to be at the same time. That's not changing. And then you have the tournament starting on Thursday. I should say the 64 field starting on Thursday. It goes from 64 teams to 16 teams in 4 glorious days, Thursday through Sunday. We all love it. We all take those days off work. We all love it. You know what that is all about. The days in between is when you have these play-in games. Right now, you just have a couple play-in games because you're only at 68. But you double that if you get to 72, and you add even more if you get to 76. When and where do those games get played? You can pick, set sites like you do with Dayton for the first 4 right now. But how does it work when you're adding more teams into the mix? Do you start playing them on Monday or Tuesday? Is that too quick of a turnaround for these teams to find out and then suddenly have to get everything organized and flown out within a day? That seems crazy. Do you cram them all in on Tuesday, Wednesday? Maybe you try, but that seems really difficult too. And even then, does it even matter? Most of you are in office pools, or many of you are in office pools. Your office pool, almost certainly, if you use ESPN or CBS or anywhere that does a tournament bracket, their deadline for you to have your bracket submitted is before those Thursday games start. It's not before the first 4 because people don't care about the first 4. They never really have. That's not going to change. You fill out your bracket, you pick, last year was Texas versus Xavier. You just pick that team. Whichever one of those teams, North Carolina, San Diego State was a play-in game. Whoever won that game played Ole Miss. You either picked Ole Miss to advance or you picked North Carolina / San Diego State because they just don't, it doesn't matter. These are not games that the general population who follows this sporting event, which they do religiously, we know that, they don't care about this. I don't think that's going to change. But it's going to put more money in the pockets of the big commissioners of the high major conferences, and that's what they care about, and that's why they're going to continue to push for this until eventually this committee relents and expands the tournament. We thought it might happen today. We live to see another day. We'll see how much longer we can hold on before this thing does get expanded to 72 or potentially, eventually, probably 76 teams. Well, folks, Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, and other former Zags are getting underway in the NBA Summer League out in Las Vegas. We're going to break down how and when to watch those teams coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, closing out the show, talking a little Summer League. And I'll say this, I'm recording on Thursday, July 10th, right now, just right as the game between the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers is getting underway. So as many of you are listening to this, that game is over. And so we're not going to be able to have an update on how Nembhard and Hickman have done in their first Summer League game. We'll have some updates for you throughout next week and the following week as Summer League keeps going. What we do have are some brief updates on a few Zags who played in the Salt Lake Summer League, which went from July 5th to July 8th in Salt Lake City, and the California Classic Summer League, which went from July 5th to July 8th in San Francisco. Not any of the most recent former Zags in the Summer League, but we did see Jeremy Jones in action. He had 3 points in his first game, 5 points in his second game, and then 12 points in his third game as a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. In that third game, Jones went 4 of 6 from 3. That included a buzzer-beating 3 at the shot clock that was like Damian Lillard distance. He was about 6 or 7 feet behind the line. They've been giving a lot of playing time to Jeremy Jones, and I feel like that's not nothing. It's a good sign that they're at least really giving him a strong look. I don't think Jeremy Jones is an NBA player, but I think he'll get a spot on the Memphis Hustle if he continues to play well in their G League. Afton Reed played in a pair of games for Memphis as well, scored 2 points in each of them. And then Hunter Sallis played in a pair of games for the 76ers. He's on a 2-way contract with them. He had just 3 points in his first game, but he scored 11 points in his second game, which was against that Memphis team. And that included him throwing down a wicked dunk. If you haven't seen this highlight, go watch the highlight of Hunter Sallis's dunk in the Summer League for Philadelphia against Memphis. It was tremendous in-game dunk. You don't see those very often. So good for Hunter for establishing himself as a player to watch for the 76ers. California Classic only had one former Zag. It was Umar Ballo. He played just one game, had 5 points on 2 of 2 shooting. Now we move on. Let's look at how we can watch the 4 new Zags who are playing professionally for the first time. That's, of course, Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman, both with the Dallas Mavericks, Caleb Battle with the Phoenix Suns, and Ben Gregg with the Boston Celtics. Anton Watson's with the New York Knicks, and Drew Timme with the Brooklyn Nets. Don't have their schedules right in front of me, but if you want to watch them, you can check them out throughout Summer League as well. For Dallas, again, their first game is tipping off pretty much right now, July 10th versus the Lakers, 5 p.m. Pacific time on ESPN. Their next game will be 2 days later on July 12th. That'll be against the San Antonio Spurs, 1 p.m. Pacific time, also on ESPN. It's nice that Nembhard and Hickman are on the same team as Cooper Flagg because they get much more ESPN coverage than the other teams. Their third game, 2 days later again, this time the 14th against Charlotte, 3:30 p.m., NBA TV, and then their final game will be against Hunter Sallis and the 76ers, July 16th, 5 p.m. on ESPN. So the 10th, the 12th, the 14th, and the 16th for Nembhard and Hickman. For Caleb Battle and the Phoenix Suns, their first game will be July 11th, Friday, 6 p.m. That game will be on ESPN for Phoenix and Caleb Battle. Then they got 2 games on NBA TV, but they also have a game on ESPNU. That'll be July 14th. Phoenix versus Sacramento, again, 7 p.m. Pacific time for that one. And then there's Ben Gregg. Ben Gregg still playing for the Boston Celtics, despite the fact that he signed a professional contract with SIG Strasbourg, a team in France, for the upcoming season, the LNB Elite League. So Ben Gregg is going to France. He's playing with that club next year, but he's still competing here with the Celtics. Perhaps if he can do enough with Boston, they'll maybe try to get him to a 2-way or sign him to a contract that maybe he would then get out of his Boston deal or his France deal. But I think it's pretty likely we're going to see Big Ben playing in France next year. Regardless, if you want to watch him 4 more times before he moves out to France, you can do so starting July 11th versus the Memphis Grizzlies at 1 p.m. on NBA TV. Then the 13th versus the Knicks. So that'll be Ben Gregg versus Anton Watson, 2:30 p.m. on NBA TV. The 14th, 1 day later, versus the Miami Heat, 5 p.m. on ESPNU. And then the 17th, Boston versus Los Angeles Lakers, 6 p.m. Pacific time. That one, because it's Boston versus LA, that one gets to be on ESPN. We'll have updates, recaps. We'll talk to you about what we see. We'll talk to you about how these guys are looking, not just from a box score stats. Like, we'll also talk about what we're seeing from them. Are they getting a lot of playing time? What are the coaches saying about these guys? How likely is it that they're going to parlay their performance in Summer League into an NBA contract or a 2-way contract, or at least an invitation to a G League team? We're going to have all of that coverage throughout the next week or so here on Locked On Zags as Summer League gets underway. That is going to wrap it up for me today and for this week. So, folks, I want to thank you all for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you all to have a fantastic weekend here. And, of course, as always, go Zags.